Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm the geographer Elazian, coming up in today's newscast. Another deadly weekend of terror in Jerusalem as a Palestinian man rams his car into a bus station, killing 3 people, including 2 small children. As the death toll from the earthquake in Turkey and Syria tops 28,000, Israeli teams on the ground have so far rescued 19 people from the rubble. And legislation on the judicial reform set to hit the Knesset floor this week as U.S. President Joe Biden weighs in for the first time. Another deadly weekend in Israel's capital as 3 people, including 2 small children, were killed in a terrorist car ramming on Friday at a Jerusalem bus stop. The terrorist was neutralized. Several injured victims remain hospitalized. Following the attacks, the family home of the attacker was sealed, and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir ordered the police to launch a major security operation in East Jerusalem. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
The innocent Jewish victims of the latest terrorist attack in Jerusalem's remote neighborhood were doing nothing more than waiting for a bus before the start of Shabbat. 8-year-old Asher Menachem Peli became the 3rd fatality from the terrorist car ramming, dying in hospital on Saturday. He was buried Saturday night alongside his 6-year-old brother Yaakov Yisrael Peli, who died at the scene of the attack. The boy's 42-year-old father is in moderate condition, and another brother was lightly hurt. Another fatality was Alter Shlomo Letterman, a 20-year-old yeshiva student who had married only 2 months before. He and his wife had been on their way to his parents' home for Shabbat. Police arrived on the scene and neutralized the attacker, identified as Hussein Karaka, 31, an Israeli citizen and resident of the eastern Jerusalem neighborhood of Issawiya. Witnesses said the driver intentionally accelerated his blue car into the group of Israelis waiting at the bus stop. A senior Israeli official said Karaka was released from a psychiatric hospital in northern Israel only days ago.
We had a very sad situation here where a terrorist drove his car straight into a bus loaded with people. Volunteers of United Hatzalah, when we responded, we saw children underneath the car. We had Jews and Arab volunteers of United Hatzalah saving lives in this terrorist attack.
Police said officers detained 10 relatives of the terrorist in Issawiya and Atur, including his parents, his brother, his wife, and his landlord. His family home in Atur was sealed. Karaka's Facebook page includes posts hailing attacks against Israeli soldiers and civilians. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said he had ordered police to set up roadblocks around Issawiya, where the terrorists came from, as a deterrent. Ben-Gvir also called on police to prepare plans for Operation Defensive Shield 2 in East Jerusalem. Defensive Shield was a major Israeli military operation in Judea and Samaria during the Second Intifada in the early 2000s. However, a senior government official was quoted in Hebrew media outlets saying the Prime Minister will decide on any operation, and only after conferring with the security establishment and after an orderly discussion in the cabinet.
And following the terror attack in Jerusalem, a rocket was launched from Gaza into Israel Saturday night, the 2nd attempt this month. The details in the following report. Red alert sirens sounded at Kibbutz Nachal Oz Saturday night as Palestinian terrorists in Gaza fired a rocket at southern Israel. The projectile was intercepted by the Iron Dome air defense systems. There were no injuries and no damage caused. Local residents heard a large explosion as Iron Dome downed the single missile. It was the 2nd attempted rocket attack from Gaza this month. The earlier attempt was also intercepted. The rocket fire on February 1st was followed by Air Force strikes on terrorist positions, prompting the terrorists to fire several more rockets that were either shot down or caused no damage. And joining us now with more on the security situation following the latest terrorist attack is former head of the military's prosecution office for Judea and Samaria, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves and attorney Maurice Hirsch. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So another horrific terrorist attack, this time 2 children murdered. And, despite promises, Israelis still feel they are lacking a sense of personal security. The Security Cabinet is meeting today. What is its response?
That's right. Unfortunately, what we're still seeing is really the carryover of the policies of the Palestinian Authority to incentivize and reward and promote terror. This is something that we've been seeing for a very long time now. It's something that the Israeli governments and different governments haven't really managed to get a grip on. It's something that we would suggest that, having done the same thing over and over again, it's possibly time to make a change, do things differently. As the head of the prosecution in 2015, I initiated the prosecution of Palestinians for posts on social media and incitement on social media, glorification of terrorists. Unfortunately, what Israel's government has done, and really but governments from the left and the right so far, has been to ignore the massive incitement from the side of the heads of the Palestinian Authority. They have enjoyed impunity for many, many years, even though they have directly and explicitly promoted, incited, and even demanded the murder of Israelis, and thereafter then rewarded them. This is something, a policy that has to change from one side of the pendulum to the other.
Now, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir calling for a Defensive Shield 2 operation in East Jerusalem. Maybe this is what's needed? Is this the right move, in your opinion?
So I think that the war on terrorism really has to include many different ingredients, one of it being making sure that the areas from which terrorists come out understand that there is a price to pay. In Essaouira, for example, where the last terrorist came out from Friday's terrorist came out from, there are dozens and dozens and dozens, aside from the house of the terrorist, dozens of illegally built houses. I think it's time that really the government adopted a policy of an integrated form of fighting terrorism. It means that they send in really the tax inspectors from one side to make sure that any tax that's being avoided there's a price to pay. Houses that are being built illegally are destroyed possibly in a fast lane measure, and really adopt that whole comprehensive approach to anywhere that terrorism comes from. This area will see an idea of upgraded, of improved, just law enforcement. We're not inventing something new. Israel doesn't need to pass a new law. All of these laws already exist. They just need to be made a decision to implement those laws to the full force of the law against areas from which terrorists came out.
But yet, we are seeing Operation Breaking the Way, for example, which has been ongoing for many months. There we're seeing near nightly raids, law enforcement going into areas of hotbeds of terrorism, arresting terror suspects, and yet we still see this continuing terrorist attacks. So what exactly needs to be done to restore maybe deterrence?
Well, so I think that what we're seeing really on the ongoing level of terrorism is really the deterioration of the Palestinian Authority. It's been going on for 15 years, 16 years. It's really getting to its height at the moment, or its low at the moment, however you see it. The Palestinian Authority is losing control. It lost control of Gaza already in 2006, 2007, and it's now losing control of what's going on in Judea and Samaria, apart from their efforts to constantly promote terrorism, which is something which they still have a stronghold on. And again, those efforts that we're seeing of Israeli soldiers, of IDF soldiers going into the hotbeds to arrest terrorists is something which has to be done as well, but only when it's part of a wider strategy, understanding that terror is being funded all the time. Just last year, for example,